Kyoto Animation is a studio well known within the anime space. Giving us some of the most wholesome classics that we've seen in anime, Kyoto Animation is a studio defined by its stylistic choices and the amount of heart told within the stories they choose to adapt. Kyoto Animation has made their mark on the anime world as a studio that will warm your heart or make you feel every emotion that you are supposed to feel. Kyoto Animation is often dubbed the mom of anime, and not because it birthed the medium that is anime, but the fact that when you sit down to watch an anime made by Kyoto Animation, it feels like a warm hug. It feels like you're about to have a comfortable and cozy viewing experience where you can laugh and oftentimes cry. This is the power and weight that this particular studio holds and what sets them apart from the vast amount of studios. Kyoto Animation signifies strength, and even though it was marked by tragedy that will be touched upon later, we will go over Kyoto Animation's tenure and why it's so beloved, and even though it was dealt a massive blow, it was still able to muscle through and be able to deliver the best content that they were able to do. That is Kyoto Animation, and this is the Anime Studio Deep Dive, Kyoto Animation. Kyoto Animation began with two people, these two people being a husband and wife duo by the names of Hideaki and Yoko Hata. For anyone that has seen my studio Madhouse Deep Dive, you'll remember their names as these two were the people that were in charge of Mushi Productions, a production company created by the legendary Osamu Tezuka who would hand off the reins to that studio to them. Yoko Hata worked as a painter in Mushi Productions as well, alongside studying under Osamu Tezuka. She would move to Kyoto after marrying her husband Yoko Hata, and during the time she was there, she rounded up some housewives that lived in her neighborhood, and they produced painted cells for companies like Tatsunoko Pro and PRO Productions. On July 25th, 1995, Hideaki and Yoko Hata would found Kyoto Animation, but it started out as a Yugen Gaisha, or in English known as a limited company. What this means is that it operated as a smaller company of a much smaller employee base. In 1996, they opened up a drawing department and then would ultimately turn into an actual corporation in 1999. Yoko Hata had her husband be the president of the company, but she was still kept as the head of operations, which is something that is still true to this very day. Kyoto Animation has a mission statement on their official website that states, "Since inauguration, our principles are make a challenge, do the best, produce required works, and keep our corporate as a humanitarian one. We value people. Promoting the growth of people is equal to creating the brightness of works. We sincerely keep moving forward to be an entertainment corporation which based on animation." Kyoto Animation would get their start doing an OVA called Cursed One Piece, based on the manga of the same name, which released on August 25th, 1992. This OVA would have 3 episodes all spanning 8 minutes in length. This was directed by the late Yoshiji Kagami, a man that would definitely pop back up later in the video. During the 90s, Kyoto Animation would rack up a bunch of producer credits. In 1994, Kyoto Animation would be one of the several producers for the Studio Ghibli film Pompoko, and in 1995, they would also produce the anime Tenchi Muyo, animated by Studio AIC. Kyoto Animation conducts business a bit differently than a lot of animation studios out there. Usually you'll hear horror stories of animators being underpaid, underappreciated, not being able to spend time with their families, and the like, but Kyoto Animation actually pays their employees on salary, which at that time, and even now, isn't necessarily a norm within the industry. KyoAni paying people a salary is very different, given the fact that a lot of animation provided is done by freelancers and aren't allotted as many benefits, and with that fact they even train their own animators in-house. In fact, KyoAni took in a lot of animators that didn't have any prior experience within the industry, and made sure that the employees don't essentially have to look elsewhere to make money during the production of their series. KyoAni is also known for hiring more women for their studio in comparison to the majority of studios, and having them in very prominent roles within the company as well, even going so far as to win an award by the Women in Animation called the WIA Diversity Award, which is a non-profit organization. It states that Kyoto Animation was chosen by the WIA Board of Directors to receive the 2020 WIA Diversity Award for corporate achievement because of their commitment to inclusivity by creating a gender-balanced workplace. "It is our honor to award this important award to Kyoto Animation," said WIA VP Jinko Goto. "As a Japanese producer myself, I'm particularly proud of the way Kyoto Animation shares WIA's inclusive principle of hiring female artists, as well as their commitment to training artists." Kyoto Animation is very high on stability, and making sure their team can be on top of their game while also treating them like they are the top of their game. They serve as a beacon of light in a rather cutthroat industry. And seeing as KyoAni was on top of producing animes and handling subcontracting in the beginning, they wouldn't actually develop their own anime until the year 2003. Kyoto Animation historically has always been a quality over quantity studio, opting to produce 1 to sometimes 2 animes per year, with OVA sprinkled in the year too, mainly to not overextend and overwork their staff that's already working on projects. KyoAni displaying a very unique business model is something tantamount to the company as a whole. It shows that no matter how awful a situation can be, someone can actually be that inspiration or that change that people aspire to see happen. KyoAni, for anyone that's a fan of them, they have a sense of style that's unique to their own. Every anime studio usually has their own style that sets them apart from other studios, and that is what draws people to said studios, but in Kyoto Animation's sense, this is their strongest quality. Seeing as their work is done in-house, this opens up their animes to have their style and be as refined as they are. Kyoto Animation has this insane level of detail within their shows that's almost unparalleled in comparison to most animes you've seen. Anytime you sit down to watch an animated work from them, you're blown away at how beautiful the animation is, and the visuals accompanying said animation are to be revered as well. This is accomplished because of how KyoAni is structured, and due to them once again not tackling as many animes as most studios tend to do, they're able to achieve this time and time again on various works. Keeping the quality consistent across these products is a massive strength the company's been able to uphold. And how are they able to animate this well? Remember when I said they taught their animators their style? Well, in the year 2000, Kyoto Animation would create their school called the Kyoto Animation School. This school would have two programs within it, one being the professional training course and scheduled art classes that are open to the public. Those classes were open for 10 years until they closed that operation in December of 2010. The course was split into 3 programs, one for aspiring directors, animators, and for background artists. And a cool thing about this course was the fact that students would be offered a test to be able to join the studio as a full-time employee, sometimes even joining the company right after you finish a course. It's a good measure to see whether or not this line of work was cut out for people that wanted to dedicate their life toward animation. It was also very reasonably priced as well, to attend classes with 0 entry fees, and the price was set at 8,500 yen, which equates to $59.61 in USD. For 6 classes, it was essentially a steal, where you'd learn the tools of the trade from the people that bring all the animes to life. KyoAni has this very distinct style of animation due to the fact that their style is heavily reliant on character acting. Beyond just the character acting, the backgrounds, how the shots are framed, everything is looked at painstakingly to make every scene look as wondrous as it is. The scene is framed to always tell a story even if nothing is happening at the moment. A ton of notable names came out of the KyoAni school, animators like Tomoyo Kamoi, who graduated in the 11th generation of the school. Kamoi worked on shows like Clannad, The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, K-On!, and so much more. Same with Naoya Nakayama, who graduated in the 19th generation. He'd work on Mario Color's Phantom World, Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, and also was responsible for the viral Chika dance from Kaguya-sama Love is War. The KyoAni school has paved the way for success for animators alike, being able to achieve monumental accomplishments within the studio and also abroad with their time with the company. It showed that what KyoAni was implementing was working and the positive effect it had on the people that attended. Kyoto Animation was curating their creators at a very healthy pace. Being able to have people molded by them and able to be a creative at their company was something that benefited the studio immensely. The fluidity of the character movements was also something that fans loved about the studio. Everything had a natural flow to it. It felt animated but also had a touch of realism as well. In the Kyoto Animation book We're Here Now Complete Works 2019, there was a commentary given by KyoAni staff about their work on shows. Staff were interviewed about their roles within the company, but a very interesting aspect about the interview was when the staff was asked about what they keep in mind when designing characters. Kazumi Ikeda, who joined Kyoto Animation in 1995 and has worked on products like A Silent Voice, Nichijou, and Love Chunibyo, gave a response that states, "Characters nowadays have very elaborate processing for the eyes. There are a lot of times when you can't tell at a glance how much of it is the original drawing, and how much of it is done in the compositing phase. My designs have very simple eyes. In my case, there are many cases where I'm basing the characters on existing illustrations, so I often have to think about how to translate those designs for an anime. Of course, I can't create model sheets for characters I haven't fully grasped myself, so the process of designing them first entails figuring out how to draw them perfectly myself." Akiko Takase, who worked on Violet Evergarden as an animation director and also did the original illustrations for the light novel, chimed in and said, "I drew the original illustrations for the Violet Evergarden novels, but Taichi Ishidate was the director behind the Violet Evergarden anime, by the way, told me, forget about those for now and try drawing some designs, and those sketches became the starting concept that I iterated off of. For characters original to the anime, I learned about their personality from Ishidate, and he let me know what real life actors he envisioned them as, which I use as inspiration when drawing." KyoAni has a great talent for displaying slice of life stories, but adding to them so that it brings a different element to the work so it feels much more than what it is. It's a big reason why viewers gravitate toward their work as often as they do. Every time they go to watch a work from them, people wonder how they're able to outdo themselves again and again. It's a style they've culminated a massive following off of, and it's something carrying them well into the future. We talked about KyoAni's art style and the identity it created, but what about the shows that brought them to the races in the first place? Even though KyoAni started their anime journey with Munto, the anime original releasing in 2003, directed by Yoshiji Kagami, this wouldn't be the show that people remember from them. The beginning of the recognition would start with an anime by the name of Full Metal Panic. Now, the first season of Full Metal Panic would actually be done by Studio Gonzo on January 8, 2002, but during its spin-off season releasing in August 26, 2003, Kyoto Animation would take over producing the animation for the show. Now, with Full Metal Panic, it was generally popular for the time it was airing. Of course, other shows that came out from Kyoto Anime would be that much more popular than Full Metal Panic, but it's important to note that a general interest was gained throughout this show's tenure. Full Metal Panic's new director was the late Yasuhiro Takamoto, taking over from Koichi Shigeru from the first season. Full Metal Panic Fumofu is a lot more in line with what Kyoto Anime is known for producing. While the first season dealt with intense battles, this season dealt with more slice-of-life comedy aspects of the series. This is the start of us getting more in tune with the type of content that Kyoto Anime will produce in the future. Full Metal Panic Fumofu is considered a spin-off season for the series, but Shoji Gato, the author for this series, doesn't look at it that way. The series takes place between the first and second season. This season verged more on parody and rom-com, and generally anything really having to do with slice of life. In an interview with All the Anime, Shoji Gato speaks on how the show came to be. He says, "Fumofu was based on stories in Dragon magazine, published by Fujimi Fantasia Bunto, where I had a limited number of pages. I had to keep the stories tight, get the comedy right in a small space, but I really like it. It was my first experience of working with Kyoto Animation. Everyone trying to do something new together and everything worked. Fumofu was very close to my heart, and I think Kyoto Animation did a very good job of coming through on that for me." It wouldn't stop there either. Kyoto Animation would also provide the second season of Full Metal Panic titled Full Metal Panic The Second Raid, this time going back to having the serious tone that was present in the first season. Shoji Gato was interviewed by Anime News UK in 2018, and they asked him how he was able to maintain the balance between a serious show and one made for laughs, and if there was any challenge to it. To which Gato would respond easily by saying, "We didn't really struggle with getting that balance right because we did kind of separate them with Fumofu and TSR. With Full Metal Panic establishing a base for people to come around to Kyoto Ani works, there would come another anime that would pretty much show you that Kyoto Animation was here to stay, the one and the only." The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya took the anime world by storm. Coming out at the time when the internet was really becoming a strong force behind anime culture, Haruhi skyrocketed into the cultural zeitgeist of pop culture. It was everywhere. The sci-fi slice of life series dominated every internet space you could possibly think of. It was a social phenomenon. During a time where shows like Death Note, Nana, and Code Geass were all reaching very significant heights, especially a show like Death Note, the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya was able to carve its own community, and it grew and grew to the insurmountable height that it was able to achieve at the time. In fact, in New Type USA magazine, the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya was stated to be the most popular anime series in Japan in December 2006. The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya came out at just the right time to capitalize off of what was going on. What set Haruhi apart from other shows, especially the shows that Kyoto Ani has worked on at the time, was due to its inherent nature. The animation quality was the best it's ever been for the studio at the time. The premise of this series of a boy in high school befriending someone who can alter reality itself and other supernatural beings form a group around Haruhi to keep her in check is a really unique setup for a series. The series has a ton of pop culture references littered all throughout the show. It felt like a series of the times and viewers alike flocked to the show. The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya was directed by Tatsuya Ishihara. Ishihara worked on Full Metal Panic, and before Haruhi would make his directorial debut on air, also produced by Kyoto Ani and worked as an episode director on Tenchi Muyo. Naoko Yamada, I remember this name because she will pop up again soon, would serve as the key animator for several episodes at this time. Every studio has their breakout show, and this is what the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya did for Kyoto Animation. And speaking more to it having influence on the internet, the extremely viral ending animation for Haruhi became an internet sensation due to the dance choreography. So much so that people would perform the dance even on the streets of Japan. Haruhi was riding the wave of success well into its second season, which released 3 years later in 2009. Of course, it did come with its fair share of controversy though, with the infamous Endless 8 arc portion of season 2. Yutaka Yamamoto, who served as chief episode director on the first season, has since spoken out about the handling of the Endless 8 arc. Yamamoto on a panel from Otakon 2009 would say,
not to make self-excuses or anything, the concept of this idea was floating around when I was still at Kyoto Animation.
で、僕は反対をしました。
And I was against it.
2話が限度だろうと。
I said 2 episodes is the most you can do.
No way, no way.
But as a person who left Kyoto Animation of his own volition, I can't help but feel somewhat responsible for the way Haruhi is now.
まあ、できたいと思います。申し訳ない。
So I'd like to say, as a representative of the SOS Brigade Production Committee, I apologize.
Thank you, sir. You've been incredibly helpful on this matter.
Needless to say, fans were extremely upset at the adaptation of a relatively not long arc in the novels being elongated in anime form, but the turnaround for it would be staggering. The following year, KyoAni released a movie titled The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya to much fanfare from the community. In the Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya guidebook, Yasuhiro Takamoto and Tatsuya Ishihara were asked about the development of the movie and were asked, "When did you decide to make Disappearance into a movie?" To which Takamoto would respond by saying, "When we were organizing the re-airing of the television series, we began talks of making Disappearance into a movie." Ishihara would add on to this by saying, "Thus we started work on the scenario very early on. We were finished with it before the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya was being animated." The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya would actually be the second longest anime film ever made at that time, being at 162 minutes long. KyoAni by this point had built a reputation of giving you stunning quality for their TV shows, and The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya was their chance to show people that not only can they give you fantastic TV quality anime, but can deliver on a phenomenal film experience as well. It's interesting to note that KyoAni would change how they approached animation specifically for this film. They used their in-house staff to get accustomed to drawing every product they undertake on larger sheets that's usually used for films, and this was a process that led them to animate the juggernauts they were able to do much later on in their tenure. Yoshiji Kigami would be an important factor in this whole process. He supervised the layouts for their first couple of films and would instruct the staff on how theatrical animation is done. Of course, with his background, this would be instrumental toward the studio in being able to create the product they want to see. Kagami made sure that every shot was developed to fill a larger screen. While the late Futoshi Nichijou, who was an animation director on Haruhi on a couple episodes and a key animator, he'd overlook the cuts as well to correct movement and body language from the rough animation cuts. While the late Shoko Okeda, who was the chief animation director behind Haruhi, would come in at the end to see if the character's look was consistent throughout the film. This is a process that's become a mainstay for KyoAni to this very day, and it's always fascinating to see their approach to animation, to keep adapting with what they're handling and to always push themselves to go even further than what they achieved prior. Outside of the Haruhi bubble, KyoAni has found success with other shows as well, like I mentioned before. Haruhi was a key factor in establishing the studio's popularity, but these other shows have firmly secured KyoAni's spot with anime fans as a studio that was here to stay. This 24-episode anime became a classic over time due to the fact that the series is very heavily involved in otaku culture and references it heavily throughout the show, which deeply resonated with viewers alike, because it felt like the celebration of all the things they've consumed over the years leading into watching this show. It was fan service done in the best way, and viewers flocked to this show. To no surprise, it became a big hit in Japan. Development on the anime was interesting too. After the 4th episode, series director on the show, Yutaka Yamamoto, was replaced by Yasuhiro Takamoto. KyoAni released a statement saying that they replaced Yamamoto as director due to performance issues. A pattern is beginning to build here. The shows that have received this massive rise in popularity is due to the signs of the times yet again, and Lucky Star is no exception, with the rapid increase of the moe phenomenon going on at the time. KyoAni also marketed Lucky Star greatly as well, mostly having it alongside the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, stating how it's in the same vein as the show. Now, for everyone that knows, Lucky Star wouldn't be as popular as Haruhi, but for that to be a show that comes directly after it kept the studio afloat, and the name of KyoAni ever present in the minds of anime watchers. Even down to the opening for the show that was similar to Haruhi, to which the composer for the opening, Satoru Kosaki, said in an interview that a lot of the music was improvised in an ad-lib kind of manner. With the rise of internet and meme culture becoming an established part of the internet, Lucky Star over time grew more and more in popularity. Lucky Star would even get an OVA the following year in 2008, which was a set of 6 separate stories that all revolve around the cast. The legacy that Lucky Star has left behind is still felt within the anime space, especially with anime being the mainstream now. This was a great next step for Kyoto Animation. To have a basis for consistency like this, it was time for them to make another project. With the 2 hits we have at this current juncture, KyoAni would move their sights to something else, a show that also resonated with lots of people and made them cry along the way. That series being... Also releasing in 2007, this show was based on a visual novel of the same name developed by Key, a Japanese visual novel studio, and written by Jun Maeda, who would also provide the score for the anime as well, along with doing theme composition for the ending song and working on the song lyrics for the ending song. In an interview with J Magazine in 2024, Jun Maeda was asked if he wanted anything specific from the staff when developing the anime, to which Maeda responded by saying, "I had almost no involvement and just waited anxiously for the Shiroba code to arrive and enjoyed it from the viewer's perspective. However, there was one time when I asked that Fumino Okazaki's lines be delivered exactly as they were in the original." Maeda already had a relationship with Kyoto Animation before with Air, and he was ever so grateful for the team to get behind that project, so to see his work get such a dedicated staff toward this project sent him over the moon. Clannad was an emotional roller coaster for viewers alike. Clannad dealt with a high school kid who doesn't really have a care in the world for most things, but he ends up helping a girl who's repeating the grade due to an illness, and it shows his life actively changing by being next to this girl. Clannad also helped get people accustomed to the art style the KyoAni was developing, as it was pretty consistent with what they were producing at the time. Clannad will also have 2 OVAs, one releasing in 2008 and the other in 2009, and the second season of Clannad released in 2008, a year after the first. KyoAni is on quite the run at this point. They've got their names etched into people's minds as a studio you want to keep checking out from them, and in the year 2008, this would continue to be the case with the release of an anime that to this day has a ton of relevancy. I'm referring to K-On! Was a mega hit for the studio as it further reverberated their best traits all captured in one show. This marked the directorial debut for Naoko Yamada working alongside Reiko Yoshida, who was in charge for series composition of the show. Both of them were interviewed about the development of K-On!, taking it from manga and adapting it to anime form, and both of them had very telling answers about the process. Reiko Yoshida would start by saying, K-On! Mostly only has female characters appear in it, and yet the director's thoughts were not about making it focused on moe, but instead making its theme about adolescence, to feel a kind of freshness that hadn't been felt before. For me, I wanted them to appear more than just being cute, I wanted them to feel alive. Also, I wanted to impart that feeling they're living at no other point than at this moment. K-On! Was always praised for its focus on portraying coming of age as best as they can and making it something that feels like a lived experience. Naoko Yamada would follow up Yoshida's statement by saying, I considered ways to show these girls who were living in this time period limited to their school days and limited to their school. After all, the manga also steadily moves the story forward each month without pausing. When you become a second year, you can't return back to being a first year. That period of school life where you only are in this very moment now was immensely important to me, but the girls themselves don't realize it at all. I thought being able to see that aspect but having that radiance of not having a moment to say it was something that would be great to include in this work. For a lot of people, this would be their intro to Kyoto animation, and it made them forever a fan of the studio. With such iconic designs associated with the characters, it was something that had a lasting effect on those who've watched K-On! And the character design, of course, is a very important element of the show, one that Naoko Yamada took very seriously. In the same interview, she was asked what she was most fixated on for the character designs, and she responded with, I saw the character profiles that we received from Kakafly, but I was obsessed with making their heights and weights incredibly realistic. They should feel near what normal high school girls would be. There are a lot of really nice balanced proportions at this time where girls tend to be very obsessed with putting on weight. Since I was focused on pursuing that, it took quite a lot of time to complete it. I even worried after deciding their heights. I decide, this should be about right. And then that night I'd think, that's not so right at all. And frantically send a text to the character designer Yukiko Horiguchi, and we'd redo it again the next day. Achieving realism in an animated setting is something that became a staple within Kyoto Animation's philosophy when it comes down to adapting or creating their own stories. These shows were instrumental in bringing about that change for the studio, and it's mainly why we're so used to what we see out of them today. K-On! Would deviate from its source material, which was something that Yoshida and Yamada both agreed upon along with say-so from the manga author. K-On! Was able to be a breakout hit from a company with already big hits under their belt. This was what KyoAni was able to produce in the 2000s, and they were on a very, very strong start. K-On! Would receive another season in 2010 and a feature film the following year after its second season. But with the 2000s out of the way, what did KyoAni make in the 2010s that also gave them fame? They produced a fair amount of products, and some people were even privy to the company off of their 2010s work over their work in the 2000s. Starting off with the comedy classic releasing on April 3rd, 2011, this was yet another show that the internet became an instant fan of. Nichijou was a series unlike any other that KyoAni had done up until this point. While the majority of their shows focused on an overarching narrative and had an emphasis on character development, Nichijou was a series where those two things wouldn't be the central focus at all, only to have characters be a vehicle to the outrageous and ludicrous scenarios that happen to them on their daily lives. And you'd be surprised to know that Nichijou actually didn't perform too well when it initially released, and then the Blu-ray sales also underperformed for it as well, making it to be a commercial failure. But then, how did a commercial failure end up becoming so popular in the first place? In comes Tatsuya Ishihara, who was the director behind the project. Ishihara stated that he wanted to make a series you could catch bits of to unwind after work, rather than want to engage in a more traditional, obsessive otaku form. Now that the series has essentially been recontextualized, it then found popularity, so much so that it would end up being rebroadcast on E-Telly, also known as NHK Educational TV, due to fans wanting it to return. It wasn't until years later when social media got their hands on Nichijou when the series began to really take off. With the show's outlandish nature and its reliance on gags and surrealist humor, Nichijou was ingrained in the anime community. Nichijou came from the comedy manga of the same name written by Keiichi Aroi, telling the story of essentially the day-to-day lives of high school girls, and that's where the hilarity ensues. Also, this isn't to say there isn't any character development either, but it would be sweetly placed within the episode so that it felt more impactful once you did see it in conjunction to all the shenanigans you see occurring on the show. Nichijou to this day has a lot of relevance and continues to be a point of conversation whenever anyone brings up comedy anime. June 26, 2013 marked the release of the anime known as Free, directed by Hiroko Utsumi, who was a key animator on previous KyoAni titles. Hiroko Utsumi was given an interview in the Free guidebook, and she was asked how she came about developing the anime. She'd state that, "To start, I was asked if I wanted to make High Speed, one of the Encouragement Award winners in the second Kyoto Animation Award, into an anime by the producers. The manuscript itself focused on elementary school boys, but there hasn't been many titles focusing on boy leads as of late. It was a very entertaining story, so I really wanted to turn it into an anime." She'd add on to this by saying, "The original story focused on elementary schoolers. It would have been very difficult to make an impression animating those specific characters. Furthermore, it was difficult to see what kind of stories you could tell with that age group. We wanted to go along with the themes of the source material as well as finish the tale of the swimming team. So we aged the characters and set them in a swimming team in high school. Since I was in a swimming team during my high school days, I could use my experience in the story and whittle it down as we needed to. Also, I had a really strong desire to draw the muscles they would have developed by high school." Free was another series unlike what KyoAni had done before. A studio synonymous with cute girls doing cute things would have a show where the central focus is on handsome boys partaking in competitive swimming. KyoAni was never one to shy away from taking different ventures in their career, to show themselves and audiences that they really can do it all if they tried their hardest to. Ushering in the 2010s with something new from the studio that would maximize on Free's popularity. Now Free has a sizable base in the US, but in Japan it was a lot more popular, spawning several seasons, several movies, and spawned a radio show. Free was able to establish its own niche. We're going to move ahead a bit of years. The 2010s saw KyoAni deliver on shows that were definitely popular for the time and had their following, but only really when they were airing. Kyoto Animation by this point has built up a very strong base of people who love their content, but everything would change when this movie hit the scene. Releasing on September 16, 2016, A Silent Voice took over the universe as we know it. If you weren't already a fan of KyoAni before, even with the behemoths they produced over the times, it was this film that turned everyone into a lifelong fan of the company. A Silent Voice's reach was unquantifiable. Anyone who was anyone watched this film. It was critically acclaimed and it was beloved by audiences around the world. It was lauded for its stellar animation quality, a soundtrack produced by the legendary Kensuke Ushio, and directed by Naoko Yamada. This film had everything going for it and more. A Silent Voice opened at number 2 at the Japanese box office, coming only second to another Goliath known as Your Name. It grossed 283 million yen from 200,000 admissions in just the first 2 days of premiering across 120 theaters. After its 11th weekend, it sold about 1.7 million tickets, grossed over 2.2 billion yen, about 19,034,000 USD. It doesn't end there either. A Silent Voice made over $30,021,659 worldwide. With Naoko Yamada being a director before, she had the experience down pat, but this is a whole other product to uphold. In an interview with Sakuga Blog in 2017, Yamada was asked about being chosen to direct the movie. She responded saying, "As soon as I knew that our company would be animating A Silent Voice, I felt a desire to direct it, so when I was asked to be the director, I was simply ecstatic. When I read through the manga, I found its depiction of the connections between people to be extremely charming, which is why I wanted to portray that carefully in the movie. And since this was the first time the studio made a movie from scratch, I could feel an even greater sense of commonality amongst the staff as a whole." When you work on charming source material, chances are that many people amongst the staff already read it, so we all think about our goals very thoroughly. That's not to say that we aim to just mimic the original manga though. We truly wanted to make the best movie it could be. But expression in manga and anime works in different ways, so it's important to get across to the staff that surrounded me how to make A Silent Voice convey its original charms through different means. I spoke on this before, but adaptations are very tricky to handle, but you have to make it so that the work you're adapting can stand on its own so that it can be differentiated from the source material, while also respecting where it came from. It's a necessary balance that has to be established. Yamada was also asked how she had to reorganize the story to fit a film, while also keeping the charm of the original manga. Yamada answered by saying, "If we didn't rearrange it, then we wouldn't be able to present the amount of energy and charm the original A Silent Voice manga had. It'd be too much. I thought about how to capture its soul while converting it into audiovisual media. Considering the love and respect I felt towards the manga, if I didn't first deconstruct the material to actually remake it into a single film, then I couldn't proudly and honestly say I adapted it into anime. My resolve towards the work and its author was strong enough that the manga might as well have been the daughter whose hand I was asking for in marriage. I face a production every day with that level of determination." Just to really sell you on how important adaptations are to these creatives, that's the mentality that Naoko Yamada had going into this massive project. A Silent Voice told the story of a deaf girl bullied by kids in her classroom, but one kid goes the extra mile with bullying her. The class turns on him, the kid eventually moves away, and as they've gotten older, he meets the girl he bullied as a child and wants to make amends with her. This coming-of-age film did wonders for KyoAni. Even Makoto Shinkai had words on A Silent Voice. I saw the movie A Silent Voice at a preview screening. It was a wonderful film. It was constructed with sincerity and care, and the pictures and colors beautifully served the emotions. The elegant and refined direction is something I would never be able to imitate even if I wanted to. The cast was all wonderful, but I was personally blown away by Irino Miyu's acting. It was amazing. A monster success for the company, and solidified Naoko Yamada's name as a legend within this space. Kyoto Animation, for one thing, is that they're consistent, but they're consistently better than what they were before. Never a company that gets comfortable where they are. They continue to always push the envelope no matter the task. January 12, 2017 saw the debut of Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, directed by Yasuhiro Takamoto. This show found a home with anime fans because once again it was that cozy show that people needed and it fit perfectly for them. Displaying that classic Kyoto Animation flair, this was a show that demonstrated all the talents they've had up until this point and showed how fun it can be to display it, even in action sequences. Takamoto was interviewed and was put in the This Is Who We Are Now 2017 book that was sold at the KyoAni and Do event. He was asked if he had any tricks on directing the show, and he replied by saying, "I wouldn't call it a trick, but I would convey to all of the staff about this is what I want to do in this title. Since I would barely revise any of the storyboards and didn't revise any of the cuts firsthand, I had to rely on all of the staff myself. Because of that, I had to convey to them what I wanted to do with this show." He led on to this by saying, "I put the direction of this show as simple as I could onto a single sheet of A4 size paper. I thought that people would hate reading a bundle of pages, so I thought I had to carefully write the truly important things there. If you don't sharpen your phrasing, it's bad to be simple. When I say simple, it's not make it uncomplicated, but push out the essence in short phrases. For example, when you make sake, you polish the rice to turn it from good sake to top quality sake. I thought about how to not include that off-flavor portion in writing the document I'd had to hand over to staff." People took to Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid very quickly, even down to the whimsical opening that it has. It was a show that reinforced why people are fans of the studio. It was something that displayed a ton of heart and was done by people that were very headstrong on how to bring about this story the only way that KyoAni knows how. Airing on January 11, 2018, Violet Evergarden would be known to many as a masterpiece from KyoAni. Directed by Taichi Ishidate, this is as visual masterpieces as visual masterpieces go. In an interview published in Shin Q Volume 2 in 2017, Taichi Ishidate was asked numerous questions about the production of the show. Ishidate was asked what was really important to try and get across in the adaptation. Ishidate answered by saying, "Just as the title says, the story itself is about the main protagonist, Violet Evergarden, so I felt figuring out her portrayal was key. Claiming that this title only focuses on her would be going overboard. It's more akin to an omnibus of episodic tales, though in the end she's always at their epicenter. The way you present characters in novels and film is different, of course, so I worry that placing her in a new medium would alter the feel of her character from the original. Thinking about how I'd visualize my impressions when I read the novels was my first worry." Violet Evergarden is a story about a woman removed from a war and receives a job at a writer's agency to take jobs to write letters for people to bring people together. This show is episodic, with each episode tackling a different person and the type of letter that Violet has to write for them. A show so rich in humanity, the visuals were able to bring out everything the company wanted to achieve with the show and more, and those same visuals were a topic of the interview I made mention of earlier. Ishidate spoke on those visuals by saying, "I thought that a lot of people who read the novel would imagine the cities as having an atmosphere like London or some English town. Not just the London fog, but that sense of calm and grey tone city giving it its solemn image. But when I was hammering out the details with Yoshida," Reiko Yoshida being the one in charge of series composition for the show, she mentioned, "Violet could be in that type of city, but there wouldn't be any discomfort for her. It'd be too ordinary." So from there we reworked the image of the location and brought up various ideas. Tofu appears in the novel, so therefore we had to establish the concept that Oriental trade came through from the east via the Silk Road. So with that as our base, we thought some type of flashier mix of various cultures like the bank of the Mediterranean Sea in Europe would be better. Violet's own stoic image would create a sense of discomfort with her surroundings, and that could be a point where characters ventured off. We really gave it our all during the compositing for this work in order to display the warm environment. Seeing as Violet is a very integral part of the story, Ishidate had his own way of bringing about how we would see this character. The interviewer asked Ishidate if he made any requests to the character designer from the novel how Violet would be portrayed in the anime. Ishidate responded by saying, "I didn't intervene during the designing process, but when it came time to drawing the key animation, I wanted Violet's main point to be her eyebrows. She's a character who doesn't understand people's emotions and her own feelings, but that doesn't mean she's lacking something we're all born with. It's only because she was in such an environment that she doesn't know, she simply wasn't taught these emotions we all possess." In the novel, Gilbert points out to her, "You should have those emotions. If you didn't, then why are you looking like that?" so there has to be some subtle emotion placed on her. When thinking about where to introduce that nuance, I couldn't say to put it in the eyes themselves, but I thought we could place them in her eyebrows as a means to show her expressions. We then talked about how we could control the nuances of her eyebrows with that goal. Every scene in Violet Evergarden bursts with energy and has so much color and vibrancy in it that you're just left in awe from it, even with the characters as stated before by Ishidate. Ishidate wanting subtleties of Violet's appearance to convey emotion to us is the same level of detail that you would come to expect from the professionals at KyoAni. Up until this point, we've gone over the big projects that KyoAni have taken under their wing, how much these series have done for them as a company. KyoAni was riding the wave of success. It felt like nothing could stop them. They touched the hearts of many and it filled people with immense happiness with their shows. Kyoto Animation had promising upstarts and created classics for many to see, which would then make the events that happened next truly shocking. A terrible tragedy that befell the company and set a dark cloud over Japan. An event that was heard the world over. An unfortunate set of circumstances that claimed several lives.
We are learning more about that horrific arson attack shocking all of Japan tonight.
Police suspect it was an arson attack by a 41-year-old man.
Japanese police have identified the man suspected of torching an animation studio in Kyoto, 41-year-old Shinji Aoba.
A man screaming, "You die," burst into an animation studio in Kyoto, Japan.
Tonight, a suspect in custody as Japan mourns the victims of an horrific arson attack that's left at least 33 dead.
On July 18, 2019, at 10:30 a.m., a man walked into the Kyoto Animation Studio and lights the studio on fire. 41-year-old man at the time, Shinji Aoba, walked into that studio with 11 gallons of gasoline and lit the studio ablaze. 36 people perished in the fire and 34 people were injured, with the perpetrator being among those of the injured. They were all employees for the company. It was regarded as the country's worst mass killing in almost 20 years. Police arrived at the scene after they confirmed Aoba's identity. They asked why he went through with this plot and he told them that they copied my ideas and shouted, "They stole my novel, that's why I lit the fire," according to the Kyoto Shimbun newspaper. He sprayed the fluid around and onto people and set them all on fire and yelled, "You die." Among the names of the victims was Yasuhiro Takamoto. He directed the likes of Lucky Star, Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, and the disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya. Futoshi Nichijou, character designer and chief animation director on Free, a silent voice, and animation director for the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. Yoshiji Kagami, a person who was an integral factor of the success of Kyoto Animation. Junichi Udo, who was a key animator on Hyoka and Nichijou. Sachi Suda, who did the finishing animation on Free, Pokemon 3 the movie Entei, and Hyoka. Mikiko Watanabe, the art director of Amagi Brilliant Park and Beyond the Boundary. Yuki Okumura, who was a new hire at the studio. Yuka Kasama, who was also a new hire at the studio. Ami Kuriki, who was a key animator on Liz and the Bluebird, Violet Evergarden, and Miracolor's Phantom World. Keisuke Yokota, who was a production manager over several works within the company. Shoko Okada, a character designer on The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, animation director on K-On!, and an animation director for Violet Evergarden. There are more people who unfortunately lost their lives, but this is all the information that has been made publicly about the victims. The anime world and just the world in general were shocked by this. The brutality that could befall such a wonderful company that made products that highlight the joys of life could be cut down like this in such a grisly manner was something no one could have predicted. A company that put people first, treated them like human beings, was an equal opportunity company, employed so many people even if you didn't have a background in animation. A company that just genuinely wanted to see the best of what people can do. To be dealt this fate was so heartbreaking, all because of false pretenses. An evil act carried out by so much hatred by a man who claimed his works were plagiarized by the company. Shinji Aoba underwent 6 months of psychiatric examinations before prosecutors decided in December 2020 that he should be held criminally responsible. Shinji Aoba was charged with murder and arson after his attack on the studio. He pleaded not guilty during the trial, with his defense lawyers claiming that he had a mental disorder and shouldn't be held criminally responsible. Prosecutors, however, asked for the death penalty, arguing against the lawyers, saying that Aoba was fully competent and aware of the heinous act he carried out at that time. The Kyoto District Court took into consideration that he was suffering from a disorder, but that it didn't factor into the act he committed. Fast forward to 2024 and Shinji Aoba was sentenced to death for the arson attack. His defense lawyers sought to withdraw his motion to appeal for the ruling on January 27, 2024. This entire ordeal was especially hard on anime fans. I mentioned before that KyoAni felt like the mom of anime. You could always count on that studio to provide a very wholesome series for people to unwind to. It was such a hard blow for the community because of the sheer magnitude of the situation. Aoba did apologize for his actions, but of course this couldn't even begin to patch such an already very unforgivable act. The pain was too much, and it's a toll that people are feeling to this very day. But this isn't to say that no positives were achieved from this. Kyoto Animation in 6 months were able to amass 3.3 billion yen in donations, which equates to $30 million USD. 2.3 million came from a GoFundMe pledged by Sentai Filmworks, an American dubbing company that has worked with several animes you're all familiar with. In their message, it went over what the purpose of the drive was, stating, In a world where nearly anything, including Japanese anime, can be reduced to a commodity, Kyoto Animation's productions are distinguishable as some of the world's most heartfelt, soulful, and beautifully crafted works. Sentai Filmworks has been honored to have had the opportunity to represent many of those works outside Japan, including K-On!, Beyond the Boundary, and Love Chinibyo and Other Delusions. And like all of you, we know KyoAni through those creative works. Sentai Filmworks launched this drive, but the movement has been propelled entirely by the generosity and kindness of people like you who have been touched by Kyoto Animation's works over the years. The level of support and the fundraising has been achieved so far is a testament to the positive impact KyoAni has had on the lives and the imaginations of so many around the world. The amount of support KyoAni received is tantamount to what they've done in their tenure. People saw the passion, the hard work, the insane skill it took to make these products for our consumption. It's that love that KyoAni was able to build with their community is what led to the people showering them in support during this crisis. Of course, the families who were affected were also compensated as well. If there's one thing beautiful about the anime community is that we can rally together during very trying times and show our support to the ones that need it. Hideaki Hara even told Crunchyroll News in a direct quote saying, "It was an incredible amount of support. I deeply thank you all. I'm doing well thanks to the support of everyone over the last year. While my heart is heavy every day, we will continue to make animation." KyoAni during times of need were able to be shown such an overwhelming amount of love. It showed that they knew that they were doing something right. The people stood by them every step of the way and wanted to see them at their best no matter what. That is what KyoAni was able to achieve. After such tragedy befell the company, KyoAni managed to keep developing and producing projects. They would return with the Violet Evergarden movie on September 18, 2020. To take such a devastating blow to the company and to still turn around and produce a classic like this was nothing short of unbelievable. The animation was the best it's ever been and it served as a perfect finale for such a wonderful series. Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid made a return with its second season and didn't miss a beat, returning us to the fun and wacky world that was shown to us all the way back in 2017. Serenade got several continuations after its first season in 2018, same with Sound Euphonium, which is set to have a film in 2026. Free got its ending in film form with Free the Final Stroke that released in April 2022. KyoAni being able to wrap up all these series with movies in the format they've been trained to excel at is nothing short of amazing. As for 2025, we're to expect City the Animation that's set to drop July 7, 2025, based on the manga of the same name by Keiichi Aroi, who gave us Nichijou all that time ago. Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid is slated to have a movie released this year as well on June 27, 2025. KyoAni isn't missing a beat and is giving anime fans more and more things to be excited about from the company. In keeping with the model of not pumping out too many products at one time, fans can expect that same great quality that they've received prior to still be present in their works today. Kyoto Animation was able to establish themselves as a giant within this space. To have so many classics attached to your name that has such an impact on not just anime, but the culture surrounding it is something that not everyone is able to do. To have such a mindset that we're not going to mass produce shows because we want the quality to be right. To make sure their best is always being brought is something to commend. To have a consistent tone to celebrate life, to love the things around you, to cherish friendship, to go through heartbreak, to overcome said heartbreak, to find strength and camaraderie. These are all the values that KyoAni exude within their works. It stuns you every time you watch a work produced by them because they're always able to up the quality again and again. Haruhi Suzumiya, Lucky Star, K-On!, A Silent Voice, works that were able to breach past the medium they were from and had people from every walk of life coming together just to enjoy storytelling. Characters that have etched their names in the halls of being an icon, to have a style all to their own that makes you go, yeah, this is definitely Kyoto Animation. It's all due to that dedication and attention to detail. KyoAni was spearheaded by people that believed in bettering people and treating people with respect and kindness, to make sure that people's best interests are at heart and to make sure the job security is at the forefront and to reassure them that they can have a prosperous future within the company. It sets them apart from the vast majority of studios, and with good reason. Their attention to the fans, always keeping them in the loop and keeping them in their minds. It's so much that they've been able to do over the years that it can leave you in awe just at how they're able to keep going like this without missing a step. There is something undeniably special about this company that is able to speak to so many people the way that it has, to have some of the absolute best to be able to work there and provide their talents on the shows they were able to do so on, to be able to keep everyone smiling. It's honestly insane to think about. I'm gonna leave this with a question. What does Kyoto Animation mean to you? And if I can speak personally for a second here, Kyoto Animation signifies strength. It symbolizes that through no matter what is thrown at them, they can weather that storm and keep on smiling, and telling you that everything can and will be alright. It's their belief in humanity, to display every aspect of it even when it can get ugly, but to show you that those times don't necessarily last and that you can look past hard times or even forgive the people in the interest of moving on and protecting your peace. KyoAni is a leader for the betterment of people, to always be that warm blanket for you when the days get too hard, to assure you that there's still comfort and solace to be had regardless of anything. I remember when lockdown was being lifted and the tickets went on sale for the Violet Evergarden movie. I had to see it. Besides being an extreme fan of this series, I had to see and support KyoAni's next move after what happened to them, and I was blown away. Brought to tears even during a part in the movie. I couldn't believe they were able to produce something like this even with the tragedy. That solidified what I already knew about this studio. That they have the heart to keep going and their strength is undeniable. That was my first movie after having a year of not being able to see a movie in a theater, and it couldn't have been any more perfect. KyoAni deserves any and all flowers that they can get. They are truly one of one. I wanted to do this video ever since I started doing deep dives on anime studios. I knew KyoAni had to get one. This studio is very special to me, and I'm sure they're very special to everyone as well. I just hope I was able to do them justice with this. I waited on doing this video because I wanted this video to be the best it can be because they deserve that. Of course, I didn't talk about every anime they've done, which is also not the purpose of these videos, but it's to celebrate everything they've managed to achieve. But I've kept you guys long enough, so I'll leave you guys with two questions. One I already asked you, what does Kyoto Animation mean to you? And what is your favorite anime or overall thing that they've made? I've been Leon Brando, and I'll be seeing you all next time.